So today I'm able to speak to my friend John. John and I spoke probably over a year ago, where he was able to kind of fill in some of my permaculture, and he shared a lot of his experience with tinctures and different things that my viewers loved that video. And today what we're going to talk about is our experiences in what I'm calling the realm. Particularly, I'm going to ask John about his experience with spiders. Prior to us making this recording, I was also talking to John about the Tantric Buddhist traditions, which is one of the only traditions that I know of that takes all of the different eons, so spiritist, animist, all the way through pagan and to nihilism and even chaos theory, but a very magical tradition. And what John said, and I'm going to ask him about this during our talk today, but what he said was basically the thing about the Northern Himalayas and where that area kind of lives vibrantly with these mystical traditions is they live in a climate where their experience and their connection is what informs us. It's what informs them, so that if all the libraries burn down, they would still have their experience, the wisdom of what happened, okay? And so in the magical and mystical traditions, we do count what we're experiencing in phenomenon as very important, so that truly you are the library. You are the shaman. All of your experience tells you what this realm is. And I don't take it for granted what this realm is. It's always a question for me. And my answer to that is not as important as my experience. So I have tons of books. You all know that I refer to books. But what we're going to start with is a little bit about those magical experiences that we've had. And I've had an experience with the spider being too. I don't know what John's is. He doesn't know what mine is. So this is where free association with someone who is also studying who they are and what this realm is very important, because right now, we're not going to be referring to books. We're going to be referring to our experience. And I want all of our viewers, I've turned the comments on my YouTube page. They've been off for a while because things were a little bit hairy in terms of being censored and people taking down my videos. So I'm going to have the comments on, and you can tell us your experiences too. And I'm also going to tell you a little bit about what I understand the internet to be at this time. So please keep me reminded of that. And then John can ask me any question that he wants, because I don't know what people know or what they want to hear, which is really good for me to talk with someone. So John, I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself and however you want to lead into your experience with the spiders.
Okay, thanks. Hi, good morning. I'm John. And funny we're having this conversation, I'll say, because my experience with having a vision of a spider in my mind was right around, literally down to the week or so that I first met you, Lolita. That was in early winter of, I'll say it was midwinter. It was early 2004 was the year. And I had just moved to Woodstock, Vermont, nearby where you reside, to stay in a house there. So I was living out in the woods, and just a short backstory before I delve into the spider experience. I had been living and working in Chicago as a freelance musician, and kind of, like I was one of the worst intellectual speculators for years in my life. And from a very young age, to back up even further, um, and as a child, that that energy, see, we don't have a developed intellect as children, thankfully, because this frontal lobe is still growing, right? So those um, neural pathways aren't fixed when you're a child, right? They're all plastic and just actively growing. So back then, that energy that as an adult becomes intellectual speculation to a negative extreme, as a child, that was just pure imagination. And I could design a whole city in my mind, and I'm drawing dragons and heroes, and I used to design sneakers just out of my imagination, and then I would see like a couple years later, like Nike would release that shoe that I like drew in my classroom. So stuff like that. But then I found now through looking back on it that when I hit puberty and started, getting conditioned into my own psychology of male sexuality and um, stuff like that, then that imagination starts getting mixed up into slowly these ego pursuits. And then when that hits your thought process, this is just my like psychological self-evaluation here, right? I'm not speaking with any authority. I'm just saying based on what I've experienced, like you said. So by the time I was a young adult, when I moved to Vermont, let's just say that I was having a lot of cerebral outflow in the wrong directions. So that childlike imaginative quality, like it's easier and easier to sort of lose grasp on that. And then in my mind, that turns to a kind of neuroses. So that's like what we're faced with here in this modern life, where things have degenerated so much that young people don't get raised with some like core natural values. And we're just, then everything is objective. It's like we're just teaching kids to basically shop online. That's like the main education now. Internet shopping, which includes dishing out your time and energy and stuff for all these like, social medias and things that ultimately, well, the rest. So I get to Vermont and I'm in this house by myself because my uncle had invested in some real estate, and he asked if I would go and just live there and be the caretaker temporarily. Someone to just look after the place and make sure the furnace is on and stuff like that. So I moved out there in the dead of winter, and it was a really snowy winter that winter. I don't know if you remember, but it was quite cold, and where I was living was quite isolated. luckily I was able to get a job in town, and that was great to have some human contact. And through that, I saw a flyer when I was in town. Must have been somehow I found out about your yoga class, Lolita, and that's how we originally met. Is I was coming over for yoga class, and then Karen moved out there, and we started doing kirtan and stuff like that, singing devotional songs. So before Karen arrived, and right before I first met Lolita, I'm living in this house, and like the first week was intense. I love being alone, so I mean I could handle it, but it was intense just being in this house. Wood stove, it's like snow on the ground, howling wind outside, and like in the middle of the woods. I don't know anyone. And my friend, oh, an old friend from high school called me and said, "Hey, quick, give me your address where you're staying." So I told them the address, and it was like just a few days later, this package came in the mail from this guy, lovely, lovely person. And it's just this plain white box addressed to me at my new place. And I open it up, and inside is just a little baggie rolled up. Unroll the baggie, and there's just this big mushroom with like a blue cap and a white stalk, like a blue and white mushroom, just this one big blue and white mushroom. So I mean, I assumed it was magic, but I was totally ignorant. I didn't bother to try to figure out what it was, and I didn't really know exactly what to do with it. But my friend sent me this mushroom, so I was free that night. I mean, nothing to do really. It was like snowy outside, and I got some miso soup, and I chopped up this mushroom, and I heated up the soup, and then I just threw the mushroom in there, turned off the heat, and just like stirred it around a little. And it was just some kind of packaged miso soup, and I chopped it up, and I made the soup, and I let it cool, and it was like probably 4 in the afternoon or so. Ate it up, and it's like right at that moment, you could see when the sun drops
Mhm.
over, like below the window in the southwest in the winter, and it's like goes under the clouds, and so it suddenly turned really magical out, and I got all bundled up, and my uncle had these snowshoes out in the garage. When I got the snowshoes, I start walking. So, and I always, when I go and I do adventures and I'm outside and I'm breathing fresh air, it's important. I always have to do my deep breathing with my herbal smoke cleanse. So I sat and I did my herbal smoke cleanse, and then I go outside and sun's sinking. I go down, and it's like crossing by, that big rock that's it's a standing stone that has a
Mhm. Mhm.
like straight rift through it, and walk over there and survey the scene, and it's so beautiful with the snow on the trees, and everything became totally still. Like you can hear a leaf like just like flutter on the ice, like the echo of it down by the stream. Walk down a little bit ways to the bottom of the hill. I sit down there. And I mean, wouldn't have been sitting more than a few minutes, I don't think. Just sitting there in the snow, Suddenly this ermine comes up and he's just there looking at me, all white. You know, an ermine is the winter white form of a mink. So in the winter, a mink turns completely white, and then it's known as ermine. And this guy just up from the snow. And he's looking at me, and that's amazing. I've only seen that in storybooks, and this guy just appeared like that. And it was right then, I would say, that I started feeling a little bit like dizzy and, oh, okay. Obviously, my buddy wasn't just throwing me some culinary mushrooms so I could have something to eat in the middle of the woods. So that was cool. And I just looked at the ermine for a while, and then he went back in his tunnel, and so I get up and I snowshoe around, and I'm starting to feel it, so to speak. And I was still mostly interacting like externally, like through my sensory experience, just I was still like seeing what's going on. And I was out on snowshoes, and so that's a very like you're in your environment kind of activity. And I ended up at this cluster of young fir trees that were probably at the time like around my height or a little taller. So my critical thoughts at that point started to shut down, and or quiet, or just subsume into the sensory experience, you could call it. And even the reason I want to mention that critical thought part is because, to me, it seems like that's the thing that's plaguing us right now. And I don't think I can be the only one that feels that way. There's got to be other humans who feel that constant, like, even if you're, even if one is cool enough to not engage in hyper self-talking all the time, we're still bombarded by it through so much grabbing our attention. The IRS wants so much attention. That's why they always publish articles about themselves when they hire 87,000 new federal agents and stuff like that. Everyone wants your attention, and it takes it away from you, and then we're all stressed out. And admit it, we're in a society where most people are on edge in a fight or flight, and the real strong ones like are just survival focused, which is a crisis. It's a crisis. So having some moments of reducing that critical thought is really important to stay cool and serene and survive. So I'm looking at these trees, and the thing is, also being close in height, then they feel like peers in that moment too. Though I'm their elder in years, but like our auras are a similar size. So we're like together in that way. And I was just standing there looking at these trees. There's nothing complex happening here, but suddenly my vision, okay, it's like we see a tree, but it was like everything went, and I was realizing, like, I saw that trees are symmetrical this way, like it's like a vajra.
Mhm.
Hold on. See,
Mhm.
this is those are trees in two directions.
Yes.
And like we have to realize it's not just up and down. From a tree's perspective, why is it up and down? They could be feeling like they're on the side of the earth if they want to. See, this way,
Mhm.
and then the same thing. So I looked at that and it really like changed my perspective. That was very humbling to realize that trees are reflected from the core of the earth up to the sky, and it's not just everything is just this like up and down like humans want to see it all the time. So after that, I was feeling really good, but it was also coming on really intense. And so I decided to go inside, and it got dark. So basically, I sat with the trees in the last light of day. And oh, yeah, before I before I decided to come inside, that's when it happened, because I was sitting by those trees and it was getting dark, and I sat down in the snow and I actually closed my eyes just as the sky was getting dark. And that's when I saw this vision of this demonic spider being. So honestly, I have really no opinion about the good or the bad of it. I just see it for what it is, which is something in my mind that came out, but it was so vivid. So I'll tell you what it was. I experienced, I closed my eyes and I was sitting there, and then in my inner vision, with eyes closed, the colored lights that you see, that the phosphorescence when your eyes are closed, that formed, it got really bright and formed into this very definite animation, that was very clear and lucid and three-dimensional, and even had a breath to it, like a sound. There was a hole, like a vortex, a, a black vortex, like a black hole that's funnel shaped, and the light has its rainbows, and these rainbow colored lights are being sucked in to this blackness, and it appears as a cave. So there's this cave, and the cave is throbbing, okay, like, and with a deep pulsating like an intense kind of drone inside this dark cave. I look in there, and from the depths of the cave, some like eerie reflections, and just coming in from the blackness, start to see those eyes of the spider, like a spider eye. But I mean, I wouldn't have known in that moment, it hadn't emerged, but if you can imagine, just like there's a reflection of something, and then this entity starts to come out of the cave, and then no sooner did I see that it's a spider head that begins to crawl out than it immediately comes up with all 8 legs, and they're like this black, huge black spider, and it got bigger than me. And all these eyes and this jaw that's like wanting to bite. And it's scaring. It's like, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. But there's nowhere to go. And I don't even remember wanting to go anywhere either. Because in that blackness, there's nowhere to back up to. So it's more of just like a sense of almost an exhilarating terror that I experienced, just like what, and without that critical thought happening. So it's just an intense animation, and this spider reared up is the word. It reared up, and it's hissing at me, and with like these rainbow strobing lights happening behind it, and I'll tell you, if an animation like that can be generated in my mind, I mean, that would be that I see that as a masterful thing of animators that can create their exact imagination through a graphic. That's amazing, because that would look so like scary and cool if what I saw could be rendered somehow. So it was that clear and lucid, like I'm looking at an actual picture or graphic animated thing, and it's all with my eyes closed, sitting there in the snow. And there was a very strong sense that this spider was female, and there's a motherhood to it, but also this terrifying quality to it. And looking back on it, it kind of feels less scary now, looking back on it, because it sort of just started backing up, and then it slithered back, and it brought its legs in, and then retreated or just backed up back into the cave. So I always took it as some kind of warning, like, pay attention. Keep paying attention. Keep paying attention. Don't lose your attention. And I admit there's a certain amount of stress involved in that. But at the same time, I'm always thinking about keeping my family alive too. So what else hit my conscience? as I came out of that was needing to like take things seriously, um, or at least feeling that I have to. There's just this sense of like be on guard
Mhm.
that comes out of that. Um, and I mean, you could say, okay, maybe there's something Freudian there, or my connection to the feminine in my mind. There's a conflict, or do I have an animosity that I am bringing to the table, that this spider is getting defensive of its black hole? Um, these are all questions, because getting back to the essence of it is not my practice to intellectually speculate. Um, and especially not at this point in my life, for a lot of reasons, but I mean mainly for my own mental calm. um I'm practicing how the ways of disciplining my intellectual energy so that I can apply it in like as productive ways as possible now, because due to my imagination getting messed up by like my neuroses in my young adulthood, I spread out into so many ideas. And I mean, that's a problem that I uniquely, especially have, but also I think like it's also there are universal aspects to it. Um, so at this point, I don't really assume any association with anything external. And I mean, you may want to discuss that or even debate it, or maybe you can inform, some archetypal knowledge, inform, I mean, me, us, anyone, of some archetypal knowledge that might apply to that. But I honestly see the spider experience more as a projection of my mind, something, a psychological, almost like a narrative, or, you know, basically my mind taking that shape based on its format. I don't know how else to say it, but it basically comes from, well, let's say there's a teaching in a certain school of Buddhism that would be karma kagyu. Well, I shouldn't even reference it because I'm not an expert at all. So I have no authority on like, like any academic topic of Buddhism other than just the folklore. And I mean, my knowledge is based on the oral tradition, basically. So from what I understand, if I've understood it correctly, one philosophy of Buddhism in certain schools known as mind only, and like a real basic part of that is that everything is mind. Our whole perceptual experience of, you may call it this realm, samsara, um, phenomenal reality, um, perceptual reality. There are a lot of ways to describe and define this, but this objective experience we're having as subjective people, you and I and everyone here, um, my my calendar just reminded me about your solar return coming up. So in mind only, our whole experience is a projection of our mind. So, you know, it gets into a lot of philosophical discourse then trying to figure out, well, then who are you? Who is that? If it's all mind, what mind? It's mind with a capital M. So somehow we're having a shared mind experience. That's all a projection of our mind. Um, the teaching is that the existence is essentially void. I, for one, am still practicing that and learning to understand what that means through my own experiences. I do that by meditating as often as I'm able to. I like to just sit, and I did that this morning when it was still dark out and got up early. So I want to say one thing before I turn the conversation over to you, Lalita, and that's about this topic of speculation. There's so much I don't know about and understand about the workings of this reality, and I've formed so many theories in my young days about everything that I overdid it, I would say, in a simple way of saying it. And now I'm more just trying to go away from trying to theorize and instead just integrate and grow and expand my horizon that way. So I can't tell you what it's about, this spider experience on the outside, because I don't know about, you know, I don't know about most of the stuff that's theories about what this is. But I will say that we came to this place here where I am on our little off-grid homestead. And I've been finding that, you know, survival here is quite a struggle. It's really there's a kind of like urgency that I wasn't used to, probably living the city life. And I suspect, you know, even when I visit my relatives in places where they're all hooked up and part of the the whole grid system in an urban environment, um, you know, it demands a lot of conformity towards a consumer lifestyle that it takes us away from, in my opinion, you know, I'm not trying to speak for people about what they should think is right and wrong, but I'm just saying, to me personally, it seems like so much having to rely on these automated systems for everything, even including our food and stuff like that. Um, it just forms this like huge disconnect between just naturally being alive and having a connection to our survival and our day-to-day experience. And I see that as a crisis in one way, because I think if there's ever a catastrophe of any kind, um, I just like, I'm concerned that it'll be harder for everyone to adjust, you know? So for us, I was like, we've just been having this feeling for a long time that we wanted to like limit our exposure to all of that. So we came out to the country and we're living, you know, our life has a lot of struggle to it, but I realized I'm really glad because there's just these two things that I wouldn't trade, and that's one is that we're able to some degree limit our exposure to EMFs here. Of course, they're everywhere, and you can't avoid it completely. And we even, you know, spent a lot of time at my mom's house. She has 5G there, like on the edge of the village, and so I definitely, you know, I feel it. I'm aware of it. But here in our house, we have a nice little spot where the two closest cell towers are like a mile in either direction, and um, we're not connected to the grid, and you know we can shut the whole system down and not even have electricity in the wires at night if we want to, and sometimes it just happens because the batteries run out. And so having limiting our exposure to EMFs, I feel, is one huge benefit that I'm enjoying from doing what we're doing. And I think it's good for our kid and for ourselves. So that's one takeaway. I mean, I'm saying from personal experience is that too much wireless radiation, I feel, is not healthy in the long term. And I think it should really be addressed in a way that people get more aware of what's going on. And then the other thing that we're able to um, enjoy as a natural comfort here is having as much local and home food and wild and foraged food as possible. And that's another thing that, um, you know, when I'm spending time in the city and so much of the food is wrapped in plastic and it's not fresh, and you know, sprayed with chemicals and stuff like that, you know, that's going to have long-term health effects. And we got to recognize that and start figuring out, you know, if people want to survive, then it's important to give more energy to that and less energy to the things that are going to distract us. So that's my soapbox spiel. I don't know why that came out, but there you have it.
Thanks, John. And I'm going to pull together some of the things that you said that I want people to understand about why I turn the comments back on. And the reason that I turn the comments back on is because I want people to share their experiences. And just like John just did, we don't need to have critics who are deciding whether we have some Freudian problem with mothers. We don't need critics who are saying, oh, you know, there's no evidence of spiders that come out of, you know, we don't need critics, because what I'm doing is I'm questioning what we've always been told about everything, because that was like our brains got all confused with the narrative. You should believe this, you should think this is the truth, everything else is you know, schizophrenia or whatever, which I've been talking a little bit more about the advertisements that I saw when I was getting my winter tires on. Like, don't think outside of the narrative that we're giving. So when my friends, you all share some of your experiences, like, I don't need to be digested, and John doesn't need to be digested by the current narrative, right? Like the script of the psychologists and so forth. Hmm. All right, so I did not know, so I'm going to tell about my spider story, but what's interesting is I did not know when John had this experience or where he had the experience. So just given that of course, interaction was in South Woodstock. And I'm like, whoa, okay, so what is South Woodstock? Which is another question that I always play with. What is this place here with all the caves and cairns and alignments that you can see on the ancient Vermont page, which are astounding, that South Woodstock could have something to do with this, because I didn't know where John had this experience. So I don't know about that, okay? But I'm going to tell you my experience, John, and I liked how you used some descriptive words like the feeling that you had, right? When the experience happened, the quality and even like the gender kind of feeling of the spider being. And when Rose was born, that was 2003. When Rose was born here in my house in South Woodstock, I basically gave birth to her in January, so it was dark. And that piece of it feels really informative too. Like in January of 2003 is when I had my spider experience. John and I have never talked about this. Okay. So no one sent me a mushroom in the mail, but after having my baby at home, and I really wanted several weeks, if not several months, of just not going out. I wanted her to just be in this very safe kind of, experience of our warm winter house in January. And I had what people call postpartum hormones. And I don't call it depression, because I work with various states of consciousness that some people think, oh, Lolita, you're so depressed, you're so depressing, you live such a dark life. To me, none of it is like that for me. For me, I'm just experiencing different states of consciousness, and I don't have labels about my mental health with that. Okay. Labels for that. So I also want people to feel free to step outside of those labels when you're sharing your experience. So I had hormones, and the hormones were causing me to not really identify with the 3D world that I was in. Okay. I was moving through time and space. I was kind of regressing back to my childhood. I often would wake up and I didn't know who I was or where I was, because I was moving through different spaces that weren't this physical space. So that's one way to explain it, is that these walls and these rooms were not there. Okay. And I had so many hormones going through me, and I was nursing. So there was a certain amount of like the ecstasy hormones going through me, along with the fact that none of this was solid. I was in and out of many different states and places. And at one point, when I was laying next to Rose, who was laying in her little basket that we had made for her right next to the bed, I opened my eyes, just like awakening. And again, this thing was above me, a huge thing that was dropping toward me quite fast. But because physical space didn't matter, I didn't know where I was. And this thing was dropping toward me, and it was a massive black spider. It was a massive, like tarantula looking black spider with hair, legs, and it was coming down at me very fast. My feeling about that was I wasn't in the room. I wasn't particularly anywhere, but this thing was coming toward me. And the feeling was exhilarating and terrifying. Like I was like, holy crap. And like, oh my gosh, like, what is this thing coming at me? And it came at me and it's kind of hovered. It took a moment of noticing if I noticed it. Okay, so it noticed me noticing it, which was important. And then when it had my attention and we had like made contact, like I see you, you see me, then it kind of faded. It kind of let its appearance be gone. But I mean, the imprint of it was massive. The imprint of it was like, holy shit, what was that? That was terrifying. And where am I now? I didn't know where I was. I was just realizing that I was a mother and I was in bed and there was a baby next to me, and that whole feeling. And then, so then coming out and then having sensory perception of who am I? Where am I? I am a mother. I went, oh my gosh, what was that terrifying thing? And I had this feeling of it was trying to get me. It was trying to make me acknowledge it. And that's, so these are words that I had after the experience, right? I had this feeling of I hadn't followed protocols and it was letting me know. This is a very interesting part of it, okay? She seemed to be trying to let me know that I was seen and that the protocols were not being followed, and that she was actually this mother thing herself that was trying to exert her authority in some way and almost like scare me, or at least let me know that it was there, okay? And then I had this terrifying sense that, of course, this thing was watching me. This thing is always potentially watching me. What is this thing? And, you know, the father of Rose is Kabir. And Kabir, as you know, has a lot of vast experience with different kinds of substances. You know, he was with Ram Dass and that whole group when they were first using acid and different things. So he's experienced a lot of different things. And I told him about this and that I was afraid this thing was in the room, and I wanted him to like find out if it was in the room. Like I felt a little bit like this thing was claiming a little bit like that I had not followed procedures. Now, what's interesting about that is it felt feminine, like a mother, and like I was usurping her authority. I didn't know what that was exactly. And she was really making sure that I knew what she was. Like, really, you know what I am, right? And so then I was like, I don't care what you are. You're not getting my baby. So then it became like that. So then the next thing in this thought process, in this reality, was whatever you are, you're not getting my baby. Okay. And everyone can get into the psychology of this, and that, you know, some dark mother consciousness visited me. You can even say that I'm possessed. I mean, I've heard just about everything at this point to cause me to feel like I'm a disaster and that there aren't other beings in this realm that we're interacting with, which I call interdimensionals. But I have always wondered about that experience. Like, where was that experience? Because I wasn't sure I was in my room. Okay. And then I came to my room. And of course, if you know the story that I've explained before about Rose, is that she was born at home. So none of the protocols were carried out. You know, like Kabir took her and we buried her placenta here in the yard. So none of those protocols were carried out. Okay. The feeling that I have now, still like 20 years later, because this has been almost 20 years now, is that there may be in the oral traditions, but also in the written traditions of our star ancestors, and this is the Native tradition, the Native American stories of where these all beings are here, is that there is this some kind of grandmother spider being here that is kind of a female authority, right? And so I've had a lot of questions about, are these things benevolent? Do they really have authority here? Like, why did I get that visit? And I don't have answers to it. Really, I just have more like, I think the holding the question is really important. And I'm happy to hear people's feedback on it. But what I say to you is when, as John explained, kind of the critical thinker goes down and all the data, that we're always trying to deal with goes down, and you're in some kind of space where the thinker isn't trying to analyze how you're going to pay your taxes, there is this other space that opens and is available to us. And I really do wonder if a lot of the busyness that happens here is to keep us from those kind of liminal spaces where we go, whoa, where are we? What is going on here? Who was that? Because my experience is it's getting busier and busier to the point where I really can't even participate out there, because the conversation that I want to have is this conversation. Yeah, I want to have this conversation with John because John and I have these conversations. The rest of it, I can't really have a conversation about anymore because it seems like, what's the point? It's just like this circular narrative of proving what's already, accepted. I'm not interested in proving what's already accepted. I'm interested in finding out what is this? Where are we? And if it is all Maya, illusion that I'm creating, which I don't entirely totally understand, because I think there are other beings other than me that I am not just coming up with. I think there's other beings out there that I am not projecting from my projector. Now, is it all I? Yeah, it's all I. All of us are the same being, but they have a subjective reality, and so do I. Mm. So, yeah, John, what do you say about that? I've never told you that story.
Well, I know a number of sadhus, mystics, holy men, practitioners, psychics who see and interact with a number of otherwise invisible entities. And from ghosts and different kinds of ghouls to various like classes of deities and other kinds of demonics. And so I personally have not seen those things. Hey, you want to say hi to Lolita, Mom?
Oh my gosh. Hello, beautiful.
Do you need your diaper changed?
Yes.
Okay. So say hi, Lolita, and then you're going to go have your diaper changed. Okay?
Good morning, sweet cakes. Good
morning.
to see you.
Okay,
I can't wait till we can run around in the garden again.
Yeah. Oh, she can't hear you, actually. I just
she
realized.
Doesn't. She's looking at me, though.
Yeah, she's looking at me. Okay. Let's go change your diaper. Bye. So I feel like I can't comment too much on that idea, though I totally believe it, because people I trust and care about, including you, have experiences like that. And so I rely on the experiences of my friends and mentors, but I'd only be speculating as to why and how and all of the details about it. However, I think the topic of the spider is interesting from the Tantric Buddhist perspective, because I'll say that spider is not featured in most of the iconography. And if and when it is, it's usually associated with like death, dancing skeletons. There's definitely a spider and Halloween connection there. So there's this dark element, this wrathful association with death and decay. And but like, take demons, for instance. Demons. There's other names, you could call them titans. Whatever, it's describing an entity that is caught in a violent inferiority complex. And in our tradition, people like Master Padmasambhava, who's over my left shoulder in that thangka there, in that painting, he's not the only one, but he's one of the people who's most recognized. I'm not speaking clearly about it, but I wanted to say, you know, my main goal is to be helpful, and so please forgive all of my past and future ramblings and bullshit I might say. But Padmasambhava and other yogis talk about, in their stories, describe how they would transform demons into protectors. By that I mean they take control of the demonic thought form or entity or whatever. I mean, you're saying they have a subjective reality, so whatever the case may be, something that's negative, and then turning that into something that can be beneficial and helpful. So there's a name for that when a yogi or sorcerer, I guess, subdue, somehow transform. But there's a sense of transmutation that we can also see subjectively, that how to transform our own lower energies, which is animosity, right? Like, what is demonic is animosity, is this sense of fighting because I'm not good enough and I need to have what they have. Transform our own inner demons also into what is called in Buddhism a wrathful protector, but could come up with your own name for it, like a bodyguard, spirit, like a, you know, energetic bodyguard. So that makes me think about you know, like, what would be the techniques for that? And then in regards to spiders, in just like regular social culture, you know, when we were living in India, I would have like, you know, like a wrathful tantric black robe, and there's a spider in the room, and they'll just like take a shoe and smash it. And people would be like, oh, that's not very Buddhist. That's not compassionate. How could a Buddhist in robes kill another being, you know? Well, we're not giants, and I'm not advocating killing at all. but we didn't think we were supposed to kill the spiders in our room because we still identified with the peaceful outlook of the idea of compassion for all beings. And so we were just trying to like shoo them. Oh, you want to come in? You want to sit with me here? We can put the speakers on. Come on. Yep. Say hi.
Hello.
She can hear you now. Did you get a clean diaper? So what I was saying is our Guru Ma came in the room and she smashed the spider, and you know, later we asked Baba about it. He told the story that his guru, Brahma Moima, who we regard as an incarnation of Gaia Sophia, the Virgin Mother aspect of wisdom. Brahma Moima told Baba once, I hope I'm not like releasing some secret teaching here, but it's okay. Baba, he was swatting mosquitoes or he was brushing away mosquitoes, and I think he accidentally smashed one or something like that. And he told Ma, he said, I'm so sad. I love all life and I don't want to kill life. And she said, well, it's okay. If you release their soul from the karmic cycle of rebirth, then you're actually blessing them. And so she gave him a mantra to say, that on the spot, that he, as a practitioner, I'm not prescribing this to anyone else, but I'm just telling the story, a mantra that he could use if, by chance he needed to take a life, like swat a mosquito. You gonna get down? Yeah. And so our Guru Ma that time with the spider, she said, well, you have to think of it like survival, because if the spider bites you in the night, tropical spiders, that can really do some damage. You can get a bad infection. I mean, like, hypothetically, you could lose a leg if you get gangrene from a spider bite, which is totally possible in that kind of climate and environment. And it's also possible in Michigan. We have brown recluse and black widows. I mean, my buddy got bit by a black widow, and he's a big, strong guy, and he was like sick in bed with a bad fever for like 2 or 3 days, and his like legs swole up and stuff. So, I mean, I think it bit him multiple times, but it's a real threat, and you don't want a spider biting your kids and stuff like that, so, or yourself. So we basically got permission to kill them with compassion. And I hope this isn't triggering anyone, but spider is, like, recognized, I'm saying, just in like basic human culture as a threat. So an existential threat can be dealt with in a way that's not like, we shouldn't be taking out our violence on animals, just killing them to kill them. But if it's in your bedroom, you got to do what you got to do. You're saying you're going out? That's fine. You go play. I'm going to close the door. Leave it open. So, We met this woman with Baba once that had a spider bite that was not healing. And we we met this young woman. She was like the cousin of our friend in New Jersey. We were staying there with Baba. I think that was that the 2013 or 2017 trip? I don't remember now, but that's not important. We were hanging out in this Italian community in New Jersey. We met this young woman, like late 20s or so. She lived in this old house in this New Jersey suburb, and the spider had bit her up here on the forehead. And it was like 6 months ago or something, and it was still like black and the skin hadn't like joined. It was like really gross. So Baba gave her this old Ayurvedic remedy, which is you take the chilamash, which is the herbal smoke blend that's cannabis based, but they also add some Ayurvedic herbs for healing in there. And it has to be like obviously organic and stuff, because it's the minerals of the actual ash. So you have to take the burned gray and white, like, and the charcoal is good too. So basically you take like the ashes from a smoked herbal pipe, and mix that with an equal about volume of raw honey, and so you're making a herbal charcoal paste. And she started applying that. He made it for her, and she was just putting it on like twice a day. And it finally, the spider bite started to heal. But after like months, and she had gone to like the doctor, and they gave her whatever, like, cream, like antibiotic cream that didn't work and stuff like that. So spiders are not like good. I mean, it's not like a cow that you want in your backyard because you get milk from it or something, or the cat keeps the mice out of the basement. Yeah, spiders eat mosquitoes, but that's why we like them to be outside.
Yeah. So let's try and wrap this up with some of the other videos that I put together, John, about the intergalactic and interdimensional beings that we might be able to see in this realm. And then also understand from a fictional perspective that imagination and people's experiences, and the author Adrian Tchaikovsky, who was like really driven to write that book about these spider beings, and that somehow deep in the psyche we are trying to work out what these spiders are. And in that book he had a very interesting discussion of the difference between the male and the female spider. It was really something that I understood from older galactic books, was that the female spiders have a nature of consuming the male. Okay, so consuming the male, and they don't necessarily have all that much attention to their offspring. So spiders, will have their egg sac, and they'll put their egg sac somewhere, and those things will make it or they won't. And one client said to me, oh yeah, like Charlotte's Web always really bothered me, because Charlotte's Web was this spider that was like making messages in the web, and that the web would be read to like preserve her friend the pig. But still, like, there's deep in our psyche, there's something about spiders that I think is important. And so when I have tons and tons of books, and I tend to be someone who can read them and really comprehend them quickly, the star ancestors from the Native American traditions, and I posted some of those stories, on Facebook this week, do have that thing of taking really this like nefarious creature that eats others particularly what do they eat? They suck them dry of their fluids, okay? So the native people basically took these many different interdimensional beings, because they weren't necessarily on their cell phone, they were like interacting, with nature, and they understood them as grandmothers, because there were stories of how they were helpful to humankind at different points, but then also they were considered a demon that could then eat up little boys and leave their bones. So there was that whole element. And this series by Ilan Ra was written years ago, and well after when I had that experience did I read this Ilan Ra, but it's from 1991. And if people are reading this, if you go, I just like open this book like a divination today. If you go to page 54, it talks about that they were invaded by a group of spider systems called the Shamo, who were previously sealed off into an underground cavern on the planet. Now that is super fascinating, because some of the information from the star ancestors, also from the native traditions, are that there were these massive beings that were sealed off in caverns under the planet, in caves. And galactically, these beings were, of course, predatory. And their nature was to like grab and kill, grab and consume, grab and, make quickly their potential enemy into something that was. And even in the Children of Time books, like they're like interacting with the ants, and they are intelligent enough to take the temple crystal off of the ant colony's temple. And in Star Ancestors, there are the ant people, right? The ant people and the spider people. And according to this book, and I just did a divination in this book today too, Earth is not the original home for any human race. This is on page 109. And according to this, the Earth was created as a terrarium. And the whole story of what Earth is very interesting in this book. The native people say that none of us are from here, that all beings that are here are from different galactic races, and they really break it down, which group was which, and how they figured out how to like befriend them, or at least not offend them, and almost make them into like godlike guardian beings. Their mythology is based on interacting with these ant beings or the spider beings or the giants, which I might want to talk about today, the Nephilium race, which were cannibalistic beings, that they also locked them down in caves underground. So what I want people to question while they're not busy with the narrative and all the data points and all the distress that happens out there is take the time to use your imagination. One of my clients said that we need to be very aware of the changes that are being made in cannabis and in mushrooms right now. So for instance, there's a New York lab that is changing cannabis completely. They're doing medical research on it, but they're changing it completely and then crossing all those strains with some original sources of cannabis. And my concern from my clients, and I'd love to hear people talk about it in the comments, of how to preserve the strains that give you that access, because I do have some realization about who the technologists are on this planet. The technologists are part of a control mechanism so that that mushroom no longer takes you through that doorway. Okay, that cannabis no longer has that healing property or whatever. Okay, so what John was saying about kind of homesteading and growing your own and having a more simple life where you're not irradiated nonstop and so forth. is very important if you are not going to be what I call a prisoner in a prison in this system. You need to know what this place is. And I shared something about a quote from Dostoevsky. These Russian names I have such a hard time with, but the best way to keep a prisoner from escaping is to make sure she never knows she's in prison. So for me, it's not about whether it's even a prison or not, but it is a prison if you don't have any access, like through the different dimensions, to see what is going on here. So for me, it's incredibly important to remain an explorer. It's incredibly important to have enough quiet time to question this realm, but also know what John said. It's all popping out of the void. I mean, truly, this is complete play we're playing in. We're playing here, right? It's a play, and it's all popping out of the void. So not to get overly distressed in your explorations, you see, because I feel like no matter what happens here, whether there's dragons or there's spiders or there's this whole terrarium thing that has been invaded by other beings, and I do believe that this realm is a super interesting realm, because what we are is so amazing. And some of what I understood from like the book of Enoch is that there's a lot of very jealous beings, very jealous, operating in what John called like the lower aspects of greed, envy, avarice, all of that kind of stuff. And they really actually hate the human race. So that's a whole other conversation of how do you make these demonic aspects into, at least, I'm not going to call it friends, but something that is on your side, or at least realize that they're here, like the machine elves and different things that people have seen, and that they have a default system, maybe like that spider being that visited me, that is saying, you stepped outside of your authority, you usurped my position as the dominant mother being here. I don't know what I did to get that visit, but for me, I don't get into like going, am I making this shit up? I mean, I don't get into that, because I think we're making all this shit up. So though, don't make it a problem that we're making this shit up, because we are making all this shit up. So why not explore whatever our experiences are? So let's see where you want to go, John. Do you want to ask me some questions, or do you want me to continue with?
Well, I do have a question, but I'm not sure if I really have found the words to phrase it properly. So I'll try and we'll see where it takes us. But what would you suggest? Well, say people like me who just haven't really met with a lot of the knowledge that you're talking about. I guess it's just I'm having trouble understanding how can I apply some of these ideas in my day-to-day life. And maybe there isn't a clear answer for that. But it could be fodder for an ongoing conversation also. And then another question I have is just about what we talked about earlier, and if you could even just share a few thoughts in closing about how you have been able to apply some of the self-knowledge you've gained through astrology in a way that makes it an open conversation that others can join in and sort of find their entry point and what it means to them. because I've found that in studying my own astrology, it only took me so far then to see my own chart. And maybe that's because I just haven't done a lot of other charts. So I don't have the vocabulary for it, but still, it's something that I've been wondering about.
Yeah. So John, and maybe we got to keep talking about the practical application of these magical things and the celestial objects. And I mean, Claude is a fabulous teacher for me because Claude, having so many planets in Aries, he's a just do it man. You know, he can't really get outside of just doing it. You know, he just is like, look, what needs to be done, I got to do it. And the rest of your conversations, like Claude does not watch my videos. Okay. But in the practical world, I can say to Claude, I call it the daemon, Daemon. When I first met Claude, I was pretty heavily into shamanism. And I said to him, can you see my power animal? So it was a test. Okay, so I was walking in the woods with him. And I wanted to know if he could really see me. Like if he could see me, that meant something to me. And so Claude, also being a musician, he's not just a, you know, do it guy. He's also really talented musician in his way. You know, he had those extraordinary powers of sight and listening and feeling into things, which is where his music came from. You know, he would often, when he would improvise, he would feel into something. And so music would come through. So when he felt into me, he immediately knew what I was in the other dimensions. So there's John, you, John, and then there's other beings that you have shared with me that are your like power animals or other dimensional aspects of you, John. Okay. So when I asked that of Claude, he saw me immediately. I was like, holy crap. I don't think anyone, even my shamanic practitioner friends, ever knew quite so precisely how he was able to see my other soul aspects, which are called the daemon, Daemon. And so I would say, when I was posting a little bit about Ghislaine Maxwell and her astrology, and that her ascendant in Gemini and her stellium in the 8th house of death, before I even looked at her astrology, which was just this week, I knew that her daemon was something like a female demonic spider. So I could just tell, because of my kind of extrasensory perception about beings. Like I didn't even need her astrology. I knew what she was. She's a harvester. Okay. And there are different levels of the, what I call the Orion queens. Okay. Hillary Clinton is one. And I wrote a little bit about her astrology in the eclipse blog, and with many planets in Scorpio. But what Ghislaine is she is a spider being, but she's a harvester. She brings like beings to the big mother, the big queen thing that they feed. Okay. So when people are like going, oh, well, we want to know who her clients are. We want to know her clients. You know, where's the list of the people that she was providing these services for, that she is now in prison for 20 years for? Well, I don't know if y'all really want to know who her clients are. See, that's the practical application for me, is that who we're feeding and who are our like galactic presence, like what she is an Orion queen. So is Hillary Clinton, but they're both kind of different in their category. And I don't want to get too much into that, but she's a spider being. So for me, that's the practical application of knowing what is going on here. Where are we? And why? People are always saying, why can someone like that exist? How is that allowed? Does she have a soul? Yeah, I do believe she does have a soul. but she is a different kind of a being with a really different extra dimensional aspect that she is connected to, and she is giving homage to get the power from that being. Kind of like when you were telling me about your different mystic friends who are seeing and able to talk to this. That's what she's talking to. Okay, she is providing services that her extra dimensional thing is approving of and feeding on. Okay, so that's how I practically use that. And in terms of astrology, I mean, my astrological knowledge of charts is like, I can look at that and know immediately what that means. For everyone else, say, let's just look at your chart, John. You can read about the gate of the gods and the eternal beings in my last blog. So if you missed that, just read that, because John's ascendant is at Ophiuchus. So maybe you could start to understand John a little bit like I do. I always have like his galactic, cosmic, celestial map behind me, you know, when I know that that's how John is going to approach things, is he's the snake handler, right? So if you listen to him, he's a father, and you could see that he's taking care of this baby, but he also has this really profound, like large metaphysical view. That's the snake handler, right? So anyone who has an ascendant, like, okay, Ghislaine's is at the opposite gate of yours. Ghislaine is in the Orion gate. She is in what's called the gate of man. So she has those aspects of continually having to reincarnate, if you believe in this whole reincarnation thing, that she has enough samsara, let's call it that she will have to continually reincarnate, because she comes from the gate of man, which is connected to those most base qualities that all people have, which have to do with sex, death, cannibalism, you know, improper use of those techniques, is what I would call the Gemini gate of man. So I can see that immediately in her. And people are going, oh, if we could just evolve, and if we could just grow, and somehow her consciousness could grow, or she could be judged or punished. And where I am with it now is she is what she is. Like, you're not going to change my power animals or my extra dimensional aspects. I am what I am. So I'm not asking Ghislaine to like recover from her truth. That is what she is. So part of understanding where we are in this terrarium, let's call it what the native people called it, the terrarium, is there are many different experiences who are coded in certain ways that I'm not going to fix, and I can't fix, and I don't want to fix, because that's her nature. And I enjoy that. Actually, I enjoy the game here. Is it repulsive? Is it terrifying? Yeah, just like that spider being, I thought for sure she was after my baby. There was that feeling from that thing that I had not given her due. Where I think Ghislaine, with the gate of the Orion stars, is absolutely that thing. Okay, right now we have Mars sitting between Cursa and Rigel opposite the sun at Ophiuchus right now. Okay, that's why you got my solar return notification, because Ophiuchus is looking at all of this, you know, from the eye of the dragon, which is Alwed, and handling all of this. Really, the way that I handle it is, I see it as beautiful. I see it as amazing. I see it as astounding what's going on here. And I also am very into like figuring out every trick that's played and everything that's happening. Why? Because the snake doesn't scare me. There's nothing about this that scares me. If I'm too afraid to approach it, then I'm going to stay in ignorance. Okay, I'm going to stay in tamasya, which is like this like stagnant state of keeping oneself safe, right? Like, don't explore anything, just stay tamasically like in your base values. But to me, the snake handler is always willing to go, huh, look at that. There's things that eat adrenochrome here. And as a tantric practitioner, and I don't really have any labels for myself, of course there is. Of course there is. And so if you want to get into a debate with yourself, the debate is the likes and dislikes. Like, oh, I don't like that. She shouldn't exist. For me, I'm going, that's not my thing. My thing is she exists, and let's know exactly what she is. Mm-hmm. Okay, so your gate, John, with your ascendant at Fuchsius, is also to be able to handle all of these, what people would otherwise be terrified of, and charm that creature. You know, I mean, I'm not in an argument about it. I'm just going, okay, that's where you know, what if you want to have an argument with yourself, go ahead. For me, I know what she is, and that's that. So ask me more questions so I can be more helpful. I don't really know.
No, that is helpful. It is helpful. The kiddo's starting to make noise, so I don't want to ramble myself anymore. I feel like this is an ongoing conversation, and I'll be really interested to see, well, like when I wake up tomorrow and have more thoughts about some of the things we've talked about. I have a feeling that I'm gonna form um, more like lucid questions and have some reflections that aren't coming to me in the moment. Um, so yeah, no, I think what you've said has been helpful for me. It's an ongoing thing that I'm exploring, is how to like the snake handler is like part of that is the ego, but it's not, the snake isn't the ego, it's like the handler's ego, because it's in those moments where start to think about me or my personal views, that distraction happens, and that's when the snake gets unruly. Mm-hmm. So it's a meditation. Mm-hmm. You know, if you post this video, I'm gonna put in the comments some music by a great mystic musician that I have a connection to. We never met in person, but I love this person's music, and he plays the double reed, the oboe that's used as the snake charmer's flute. And it's because it works on a real snake, mm-hmm. but also you're riding on the kundalini. Mm-hmm, yeah. So it's also your own snake, and that's getting in, in real life snake charming. That's that relationship, mm-hmm. between the inner, snake energy and an actual snake. But since we don't have a pet cobra here, though I have seen a real king cobra in the wild, 20 feet long king cobra. Wow. They're amazing animals. But obviously that's deadly, but also can be controlled. And that's why we see in iconography of Lord Shiva, mm-hmm. he's got two snakes coiled around him, because the cobra, because Shiva in his meditation is handling the snakes. So it's the inner and the outer for sure. And that's part of the balance. And I see it as a meditation. And so it's been really empowering for me to um, read the blogs and things where you've discussed Obfucius, because that gave me something to think about when I'm having like just feelings and experiences in life.
Good, John. Well, let's
Yeah.
talk again. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you, John. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. And please, everybody, write comments so that John and I could meet again and reflect on these things. Okay. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.